right, TJ, welcome back to the show. Keeper of the vault, if you will. How's it going?
Good, man. Hey, Scoop Nation, salute. How's everybody doing out there? We're still undefeated, right?
Yeah, we can say that. In fact, despite the media and everybody everybody else that lost on Saturday, that's saying how poorly we looked. You would think that we had lost also, but we didn't.
You know what? Poorly, whatever, however it shakes out. You and I just talked earlier. It's about getting a W and advancing. And what have we talked about over the last couple weeks? September is for pretenders. November is for contenders. It's never easy. So got to go on the road, get it done, look at the elements. Hey, we dealt with it. It wasn't easy. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't glamorous, but got the W.
That's to say the least. It was tough to watch a lot of the times. But one of the things too that I looked up after the fact, but the weather was bad. I mean, obviously we know that. And I love just like seeing all the comments and things after the fact of people that are like, oh, CJ Stroud can't play in the weather. Like, oh, you better hope for perfect conditions. It's like, okay, that was not like just not performing in standard weather. Like it was tropical storm like winds. And not only, I mean, yes, you're playing against a team. They got to deal with it too. You got to take care of business. You got to be able to run the ball. And there were definitely things that we can take away from this game and say we didn't do well. We didn't do the things that we needed to do considering the weather, but don't discount the type of weather that you're actually playing in. I mean, that was insane.
I think at one point, was there a registered wind gust of like 80 miles an hour?
I think so.
I mean, that's
I've
crazy.
Seen it a couple places.
That's like hurricane, tropical storm stuff.
Yeah, it's wild. And of course, granted, some of that onus falls on Ryan Day. Maybe don't throw it 26 times in hurricane-like weather, I guess. But that's the definition of this team. That's the definition of all of Ryan Day's teams has been to be able to throw the ball. And if you can't, then you have to rely on the run. And I think I was curious your thoughts on this too. So the start of the game, Ohio State starts with the ball, right? Punts, whatever. What do you think would happen if Ohio State wins the toss, defers, and selects the side of the field to actually get the wind on the first drive versus going against the wind on the first drive?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say how it would all shake out, but I mean, that's why you have to be very cognizant and you talk with your coaches as captains before you go out there to say, hey, listen, there are wins that are going to play a factor in this game. So here's what we do if we win the toss. Here's what we do if we lose the toss, and we can choose which side. It plays a big part. I mean, I believe we had in fourth quarter, our back was to the wind, or it was against it.
We were going against the wind first and fourth.
So yeah, I mean, the coin shows you how important the coin toss is sometimes. I mean, you get out there and you hope to win it. What are you going to do? You're going to take the rock and say, hey man, we're the best team in the country and you guys aren't very good. We're going to drive it down your throat, or say, hey, I want to we'll let you get a chance here first, and then we know we're going to get it to start the second half. I mean, there's so much psychology and kind of chess match stuff that goes into that, but it's not every day that you line up and you have to deal with 40, 50, 60 mile an hour winds.
I would just be curious to see how like CJ Stroud would have performed, because I think he got out of rhythm, really early, having to throw against the wind, and that dictated a lot of what happened. Because then we get into the second quarter, and I think everybody, the broadcasters knew, Pat Fitzgerald knew, everybody knew that as soon as Ohio State had the wind at their back, they were going to throw it. And so now what do you do? Now that's all Northwestern is going to come out and try and cover. And it was true. They went 2 straight possessions, 4 straight passes both times, and punted both times. And I'd be curious to see if they are able to come out, whether or not they start, they receive the ball first or go on defense first. But if they have the wind in that first quarter and they go down really quickly and Stroud's able to get into a rhythm, I'm curious kind of how that would have changed the way that the staff would have approached the play calling, and that we would have been able to run the ball ultimately when we didn't have the wind.
Yeah, the other thing that kind of sticks out to me too is that you know, there's quarterbacks out there that will tell you, great quarterback coaches that will tell you, um, you have to be like the mailman. Snow,
Hmm.
rain, sleet, we still have to be able to deliver the ball.
Yep.
Now, those are kind of extraordinary or extraordinary type of conditions to deal with,
Yeah.
but you still got to be able to deliver the ball. Whether it takes away your 50, 60-yard home run ball, you still have to be able to deliver the underneath, the short
Hmm.
stuff, the quick stuff. I mean, because if you have a strong arm like CJ Stroud does, you got to be able to cut through that wind. So, you still have to be able to perform and do certain
Yep.
things, but when it gets into a situation like that, it's going to be run heavy, but both teams have to deal with it. And I
Yep.
know what we're getting ready to transition to. Um, Ohio State's offensive line didn't look very good when they ran it, but Northwestern still did okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny too because I feel like Stroud threw better against the wind than he did with it, for the majority of the game. And I wonder too if it's partly because of just the strength of his arm and being able to like push it through that versus it just sailing. Because a lot of, I mean, he didn't have a lot of help from some of the drop passes and things that happened, but I will give a ton of credit to Pat Fitzgerald and what they were able to do coming into this game. And I think he had a uh, great game plan that was stated multiple times throughout the broadcast of when they are going against the wind, they're going to try and kill the clock, which they did. They had it for 2/3 of the time in both of those quarters that they went against the wind, and Ohio State had the wind. So you're limiting Ohio State being able to throw with the wind, and then too when you have the wind, they were going up tempo, and I didn't see really Ohio State doing that. And we'll get into it with some of the play calling and stuff, but it's just one thing too. As I was watching the game, I'm like, man, Pat Fitzgerald knew what to expect and had these guys prepared, and they were able to take care of business the way that they needed to do, especially across the offensive and defensive line for the most part.
Well, I mean, what did we talk about last week, Ryan? As we get ready to go into this game against Northwestern, that although Northwestern does not look very good, they're at the bottom of the Big Ten. They're a bad looking football team.
Hmm.
We knew that Pat Fitzgerald would have those guys ready to play at home against the Buckeyes. You knew that they were not going to look like a 1-7 football team, and they didn't.
Yeah, no, and I think we talked about it last week too. I mean, they played Penn State really close, and that was a miserable game. They've played a lot of one possession games all year, and yeah, they're not a good team. And I think that should be well understood that this game should not have been as close as it was. But yeah, they were ready, and they have the as Pat Fitzgerald said, 12th man in the wind and the weather playing to their benefit, and the offensive line needed to step up, and as we were transitioning into this, they did not.
Oh, man, they did not. The big thing that stuck out to me, again, what we talked about last week and even the week before that, coming off of the Iowa game, you know, we need that 100-yard rusher. We need to be able to sustain that line of scrimmage,
Hmm.
establish the run game early, and get that 100-yard rusher because it's a different feeling when you have a 100-yard rusher. And I
Yep.
think Iowa, I believe we hit like the 78-yard mark, and I can't even remember the week before that, or the week after that, but it wasn't a 100-yard rusher, and we felt like going into Northwestern, bad team, should be able to get a 100-yard rusher. Um, One thing that I saw, and I've harped on it all year, small things, the footwork, the pad level, the
Mm.
hands, the toughness. Um, just it wasn't there. When you have guys that should be road grading at the point of attack, like Dewan and Proctor and even Paris and Donovan did not look good at times
Hmm.
on the left side of the line. You know, the pad level was high. It didn't look good. And really, the thing I kind of circle, which is outside of the fundamental stuff like that, is toughness. We did not look like a tough group of offensive linemen out there. Looked like we came out a little soft, honestly.
Yeah, and I hate to say that. I hate to say the words soft because that's
Yep.
all anybody's been talking about. And I think there were a lot of times during the game where Mayan Williams going straight up the middle, the offensive line was able to get enough push to get 4 or 5 yards. But to me, a lot of the times and a lot of the issues are when we're trying to go stretch and trying to just get to the sideline instead of running straight north and south. Like you got to come out as an offensive line, and if you're trying to be powerful, just go head to head against them. I think they're trying to get too far outside to get Mayan like out in space, but Matt Jones, Dewan Jones, um, Donovan Jackson, they were all just getting beat to the spot. And like it was almost like it was just so obvious every time the linebackers and the safeties were able to read exactly what way the play was going to go, and they were in the hole before anybody could even get up to a second level to make a block. And so I don't know if it's a conditioning thing. I don't know if it's those first couple steps. I know you mentioned last week, those are the most important two steps to getting to your block and to keeping it. And, it's just I don't know what the desire is to push it to the edge when, if you're lining up against Northwestern, maybe against like a Michigan like that, or, a team that's going to be able to be a little bit more physical, you know, you should be able to overpower Northwestern's defensive line.
Oh, for sure. If you look at what happened last year when we went up to Ann Arbor, we looked like we got pushed around and we got bullied at the line of scrimmage. And that it felt eerily similar to what we experienced last year. Now, good, because experience it now instead of 3 weeks from now, right? Get it out of your system. You were able to still get a 21-7 victory. If you played like that as an offensive line against Michigan, even at home in Columbus, you're going to get beat. So again, I feel like over the last 2-3 weeks, we've been finding out a lot about ourselves as an Ohio State offense. Not as much on the defensive side of the ball. I think we're still we're good there, but because we're different than what we were last year, and that goes to Jim Knowles and everything he brings to the table. But the one thing I kind of posted on BuckeyeScoop.com probably around Wednesday or Thursday of last week was, what's everybody's thoughts and feelings about the offensive line right now? What are your thoughts on the transition from Coach Stud to Coach Fry? I know there's different philosophies and schemes and all that stuff, but I mean, you're talking at Ohio State. These are the best offensive linemen in the country.
Yep.
Changing the coach out should not affect the small things: the footwork, hand placement, hips, bending at the waist and at the knees, staying low, your first, second, third step. And you mentioned conditioning. A little bit of conditioning goes into that stuff, especially when you have sloppy footwork in the fourth quarter. But in the first, second quarter, I mean, conditioning has nothing to do with it. To me, it's right up here. You're not thinking about the little things that you should. And that's concerning to me.
Yeah. And to your point too, I mean, fourth quarter, they were able to run pretty well, for the most part, especially on that last drive. But, they were conditioned to that point, at least, to, continue to wear down and beat down Northwestern, so I do see that point, but it's crazy to me to think that they're just getting beat to every spot and can't sustain a block to allow Mayan Williams, who's a physical running back, to get 1 yard on 3 different plays when all you need is 1 yard. And like, they just got destroyed every single time. And I don't know, like, and I'm curious your thoughts before we move on to the next topic here, but like, what has changed with this offensive line over, what they were prior to the last 3 weeks? Because I think we were talking earlier in the year about, is this offensive line better than they were last year?
Well, I don't know if we are. I really don't. I want to say that maybe we're kind of just in the same place. We've basically we've been plateauing instead of peaking, and I don't think that that's a good thing, but you also have to think, hey, we put some new pieces in there, mainly at the tackle spot. Um, I don't know what has changed, but the toughness part of it comes into play,
Yeah.
and really maybe it just goes back to having a first year coach on the offensive line. These guys are still trying to get familiar with Coach Fry and what he brings to the table and what he expects and all that, but still, you're at Ohio State. You're at one of the best schools in the country. You're a top 5 team in the country. Whether you have Coach Stud or Coach Fry should make no difference in what you put out there on the field on Saturday at 12,
Mm-hmm.
3:30, 7 o'clock. Doesn't matter. You know, and again, the small things, it's not on coach. That's on you as a player when you get out there. Those are the things that have to be going through your head. It's, hey, these guys are, they just walk linebackers up into the A gap. What are we going to do? Who's pinching, who's
Mm-hmm.
squeezing down so that CJ Stroud doesn't get his head ripped off? And I think that maybe at times these guys just don't, maybe there's a lack of focus. Maybe, I think maybe some guys just need to be called out.
Yeah.
At times, that's really what it takes. I'll give you a little story back when before I played my best collegiate game in my career, which was up in Ann Arbor in '05, and we went up there and we were able to get a piece of the Big Ten championship by beating Michigan in their house. I was called out the week before that because I didn't have great performances against Illinois and I believe Northwestern the previous 2 weeks. And I was fronted out by some guys.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I took that to heart. And I made sure that the product that I put out on the field against Michigan in that final week of the regular season, people were going to say, okay, the message was delivered, received, and he did what he was supposed to do.
Yep.
And I got Jim Parker, offensive lineman of the game, and played a huge role in what we did in the run game and the pass game. So I think some guys might need to be called out.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see kind of how that happens because I mean we've seen it earlier in the year with some of the defensive performances and benching Denzel Burke and benching Josh Proctor and like getting in some of those younger guys and I'll be curious to kind of see who in either in that room, whether it's coach, player, whoever stands up and actually starts to be the vocal leader for that unit specifically. Or
Yep.
even somebody like a CJ Stroud. Like, the pass protection was pretty solid. I thought all day long on Saturday, and I think that's been, obviously one of the strengths of this team all year is just keeping CJ Stroud safe. But I will say he pulled it finally on multiple times and he did it. So thank you to CJ Stroud for actually, I don't know, listening to whatever, pulling it out of pulling the rabbit out of your hat or
He
I don't
was
know
listening
what.
to us last week. He was
Yeah.
listening to you, man. Come on.
It's just it was about time.
You were in his headset, and I swear, and I'm not making this up. When I was watching the game and I saw him pull it, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, thank you. He's, what you actually spoke to last week. Yes. And it was there. And I think
Yep.
there was like 2 or 3 other ones
Yep.
that he could have pulled it on and he
Oh, yeah.
didn't, but I enjoyed seeing that as much as you did.
Yeah, there was one I think in the fourth where he handed it off, and as he handed it off, the safety was crashing down on the far edge, and if he would have just kept it, that's a touchdown because there was the safety in one corner, and he would have gone out and had maybe a 40-yard touchdown. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity, and I think it's good to see that wrinkle, to see it ahead of a Michigan game and make them worry about it, at least to some degree, whether or not it's a continued piece of the play calling or if it's just script relevant to whatever's happening in the game. It was definitely needed to get this win, and I think the biggest plays in the game were C.J. Stroud pulling it, getting to the edge, and picking up huge fourth down and picking up that 44, I think it was, yard run in the fourth quarter to set up the final touchdown there. So hopefully it happens more. But
right, and if you remember last year against Michigan, I think there was some people that called out CJ's toughness when he did run the ball a couple times, and I think there was an opportunity for him to pick up a first down, and he kind of came up short. Maybe if he would have put his head down, or it's a business decision
Yep.
sometimes. But as a quarterback, you know that you are going to gain the respect of everybody.
Mhm.
If you pick up a first down the hard way by taking on a safety and a linebacker, and you're going to you're going to take a shot and you're going to get your bell rung, but you pick up the first and you gain the respect of your teammates, and they will play harder for you.
Yep. And there was one, because I think there's a lot of instances where it's not a designed, but I do wish he would take off in a lot of instances. And there was one I remember specifically, and I love the fact that he keeps his eyes downfield. I would rather him be looking to pick up a big chunk throwing than put himself at risk in 75% of situations. But he could have easily picked up 9 yards, and he actually crossed or didn't cross the line of scrimmage. He was about to cross the line of scrimmage, and we got called for an illegal player downfield. And because I think everybody thought he was going to run, and so you're just going to try and block. And it ended up not even being a pass, or it didn't be completed. But like, I remember that one specifically, where in those instances, I think that especially is where those guys are going to look to him and say, "Are you putting yourself kind of in those positions to get every yard that we can possibly get in a game that's already proving to be tougher than we thought?"
Yeah.
And I'll be curious to see that. One thing that I didn't like seeing a lot of, and I put it on Twitter too, but just the body language of everybody. I mean, it almost looked like everybody on this team in the first quarter just expected that Northwestern wasn't even going to actually come to the stadium and try to win a game, And so they just looked confused. Everybody was just yelling at each other, trying to get into position, even on defense. And I'm curious kind of like what goes into that, or how do you, as a former player, how like is it just a player that tries to pick everybody up? Is it a coach? Like, who is going to be that person on this team to
Comes
get them?
right. I mean, the guy that's going to light the fire,
Yeah, yeah.
right? A lot of times it's going to start with your captains. Not all captains are vocal leaders. Some of them are just, hey, this guy's the best player on our team, so he's going to be a captain. But your leaders on your team, your vocal leaders, are the ones that have to get it done.
Mm.
When I was playing, there was times where you go against, let's say we're playing a MAC opponent, Kent State, BG, whatever it may be, and you kind of think, okay, I can roll out here and put my B or C game out on the field, and we're going to win.
Mm.
There's a reason that I'm at Ohio State and he's at Miami of Ohio. But you can't do that when you're playing a Big Ten opponent. Can't do it. And Northwestern, when they came out from the jump and hit Ohio State right in the mouth, that should be the instant wake-up call that you need that says, hey, listen, man, I know these guys are junk with their record and their standing inside the Big Ten, but these guys showed up ready to play.
Mm-hmm.
And we're on the road, bad elements, but we better get things rolling. Light the fire now, because there was moments there where it did not look very good, man, and it was very questionable. Guys that really wanted to be out there on the field. Say it, body language. You can read that, and it was evident that there was guys on the Ohio State sideline that just didn't look like they had it.
Yep. And I just remember every time they would show like Mayan Williams or CJ Stroud or anybody sitting on the sideline on offense, it was just like just unenthused. Like they were confused as to what was happening. And part of that to me is on Ryan Day. I mean, we're going to talk about it here now just with the play calling, but I don't think whatever the script was or whatever the game plan was coming into this, it mimicked obviously what we're used to seeing from this Ohio State team. They're going to try and go deep. They're going to try and take the top off. They're going to push the passing game to push the run game. And I just thought there was a lot of, yes, there was a lot of drops. There was a lot of overthrows. There was a lot that, whether that's wind affected, whether that's just concentration affected, it was just off, But I thought there was a lot of success on some of the shorter routes, some of the routes going to the sidelines, just really quick stuff. But Ryan Day continued to try and force balls 15, 20 yards downfield in 50-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah, kind of. It's a head scratcher, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure. Did you count how many bubbles were thrown?
No, I did not. I did not. Blocking that out of my mind forever.
And I think when it comes down to play calling, you have to be able to adapt as much as a coach to what you're going to call, as the players have to do on the field and handling it. And real quick, just back to, lighting a fire and changing body language on the sideline. That to me was the perfect moment for Mayan Williams to step up and say, "Hey, listen, guys, get it going.
Yep.
Get in front of your offensive line as they're sitting there on the bench. Say, come on, guys, it's time." Maybe some other more choice words than that, but that would have been a perfect moment for a guy like him. I always love when the running backs step up and kind of get it going a little bit. But with the play calling, it's. I thought it was fine. I got to a point where when you saw some of those drops, it's almost like, CJ, just go back to number 18. Why mess with anybody else? Because it didn't seem like he was getting a whole lot of help from anybody else. 18 is like, he's old faithful. He's old reliable. You could just, what you're going to get from him. And boy, how can you not at least once a series target that guy?
One of the stats that they brought up where I think it was on it might have been his first catch of the day, that he had 49 catches on the season, 40 of which have gone for first downs.
Wow.
That's pretty good. And I think his first 4 or 5 catches all went for first downs too. So like, he is a first down machine. And no, I don't think he got and I'm sure there are reasons for it. Julian Fleming had a pretty terrible day, all things considered. And, could you get Egbuka more involved? I just, if Marvin Harrison is your first down getter, why not get those other guys like an Egbuka on? They tried it a few times with that little toss sweep or, a little touch pass, at the line of scrimmage to get him, on the edge. But that's the guy that I would have in those shorter scenarios. And I think you have to rely more heavily on those guys. Maybe this is a game where Jackson Smith and Jigba actually would have been kind of nice to have, and you don't think about it. But there are those instances, and we know that those guys are not really super vocal leaders either. And yeah, I think somebody has to even step up on those instances and get those guys more concentrating on, okay, we need to either shrink the field some, come back more, and like get these throws done more easily versus trying to throw a 20-yard bomb and just being, 5-10 yards over Julian Fleming or, just off the fingertips of Egbuka on what should have been a touchdown. So I thought the play calling wasn't bad, but it was just, it mind blows me sometimes what Ryan Day does when he'll go 4 or 5 straight passes and not even attempt a run. And then he'll go 5 straight runs, not even attempt a pass. And it's like, you got to have balance there. And when we did have balance, or when we went more heavily on the run than we did the pass, we scored 3 touchdowns.
You're 100% right. You have to find a way to have balance within your offense. But I think kind of the thing I talked about last week with play calling and the chess match that goes on between an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator, to a point, as a play caller on offense, you start to think, okay, well, they're showing me something here that I have to try and take advantage of. Maybe it's worth it for us right now to throw the ball 4 or 5 times in a row. Or you're also saying, hey, man, my offensive line is just not getting it done. They're not coming off the ball with low pads. So we got to stick with the pass game and see what we can do here. Now, kind of sucks when the weather is what it is, but everybody's got to deal with it. Both sides of the ball have to deal with it. And for the most part, I'm kind of with you. I feel I really wasn't that bothered by the play calling. I thought it was okay for what we had to deal with weather-wise.
Yeah. And I wish there's more change, because it almost seems to me like when Ryan Day has his game plan, that it's there's very little like changing of it in game scenarios. And he's great at halftime making adjustments, but like in the moment, you need momentum or you have momentum. I feel like there's often times where we get out of rhythm really quickly because we try to force something that's not being given to us in that moment. Like last week, even against Penn State, and just not going across the middle. It was open the entire time. And, it kind of caught on late. And I think that's what helped in the fourth quarter in pulling away. But, eventually it happens. And, I still think that the game plan itself was um, what we needed to do. But I would have liked to have seen a little bit more kind of adjustment in game to take advantage of what we had and not try and force something in 50-mile-an-hour winds and then get behind the sticks, on multiple different drives and force Jesse Mirko to be our savior. But the
Right.
defense stepped up.
Hey, I'm with you, man.
Yeah.
When you're facing that type of win, yeah, let's not force it downfield.
Yep. And the defense, I thought, played pretty well overall. I thought the interior of the defensive line did a really good job. There wasn't a whole lot for Northwestern to run through the middle. Everything was just coming on the wildcat, quarterback scrambles or quarterback keeps off the edge, or just bouncing to the outside, and a lack of maybe contain or just guys working too far upfield, what have you. But I thought the scheme was really well for Northwestern to get to that position. But I liked the interior defensive line. I thought Mike Hall played well in some limited time. I thought Teron Vincent played pretty well. Linebackers played as good as they could have. I mean, Tommy had I think 13 tackles, something like that. So almost his career high from last week. But that he played well. Denzel Burke had a good game, saved a couple like big play tackles. But overall, could they have done better knowing what Northwestern was going to do? Yes. But I think they did what they needed to do to keep this offense at least in a position to get the win at the end of the day.
I mean, you hold a team to 7 points in their house. I mean, you can't really be that upset about that, right?
Even Northwestern.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, hey, if we're going to just go for a field goal or we're going to go for the goose egg, there's that. But there was a couple of guys in the secondary. I saw number 4, number 14. At times they came up and they kind of looked like a little lame duck trying to make some tackles, like they were doing arm tackles, and they whipped a couple times. But for the most part, you know what? I felt really good about how the defense played. And, until you've ever actually lined up and played in that type of weather, you don't know how guys are going to respond. You can practice in it, you can go and work out or run or, all that stuff in it. But when you line up and play a game and you have to come downhill and you got to tackle a running back that's coming full speed at you, you can kind of understand how at times guys may kind of turn to the side a little bit when they're going to make that tackle. And it doesn't really work that way. So, when you come in there, with the way HD film is now and you get to see it on TV, it makes you look bad. And at times I thought there were some guys in the secondary that could have maybe come up and played a little tougher. But 7 points to Northwestern in their house on a really, really crappy day. Got to be happy with it.
Yeah, there's a couple to your last point there. I remember a couple plays just watching Lathan Ransom just waiting for the running back to come to him at the second level instead of just attacking after knowing that it's going to be a run. I mean, it was obvious at that point he had already gotten to the line of scrimmage. So, not attacking to that point and just kind of waiting allowed Evan Hull to pick up an extra 5-6 yards. But I thought Ronnie Hickman played a decent game as well. J.K. Johnson didn't have his best day. Let's put it that way, but he's young. I get it. But overall, like I agree. I think the defense did what they needed to, and there was a few plays, if they go the other way, that make it even a very different game. Like JT, if he actually pulls that interception down.
Oh my, yeah,
right. First series too. You're just like, flashback from last week. But there were those opportunities. They were in the backfield a lot. There was that huge scramble that Sullivan had where he missed or eluded 4 or 5. Defensive linemen and people just trying to sack him and converts it somehow into a first down. So, there was definitely those plays, but I think overall you did what you needed to do. And to your point, hold them 7 points at home, even in terrible conditions like that, it's still a good defensive effort for sure.
Yeah, still looking for Jack Sawyer though. Jack Sawyer, need you. I need to have a big monster game out of you, buddy.
Yeah, he's due. He's due. Let's say it that way. So I look for it soon. But the last thing here on our list is just looking forward to the Indiana game. So we've obviously talked about what we saw from Northwestern, but what is your number one focus if you're Ryan Day and this staff this week? And I think I already probably know the answer. But going back home to play an Indiana team that you should, I think it's like a 41-point spread right now, that you should just absolutely demolish.
Hate it when they do those high spreads, man. I mean, what was it against Northwestern? Was it 38?
I think it stayed 38, yeah.
Oh, man. This could be the game where maybe Tom Allen, they put the nail in the coffin on coach out there. I don't know. You already know what I'm going to say. Offensive line. I need to see better. I need to. You've had 3 weeks now. Penn State, good team on the road, but your performance against Iowa, your performance against Northwestern, where you should have dominated, and when everybody went and watched the game film Sunday morning, the offensive line, everybody should have said, "Wow, man, they were just bludgeoning guys." Didn't see that. I need to see that this week. I really do. And being back in the comfort of your own place, being in a horseshoe, offense needs to click. Get everything firing on all cylinders. And then defense just has to keep doing what they're doing. You limit teams, to a touchdown, 10, 14 points. You can't ask your defense to do anything more than that, really.
Yeah, and you're getting into the stretch too. So, I mean, I don't know that you necessarily need this dial points or you need anything else to, cement your place in the college football playoff. So, you don't need to come out and absolutely just blow everyone away, but you have to win convincingly and you have to do the things that are going to change the narrative over this team right now, which is this team is soft. This team can't be physical. This team, when they get punched in the mouth, what do? And what do they do? And this is the time. I mean, you had 3 weeks in a row now where that is the question. And if it continues to be the question, then Michigan's going to present a lot of problems, because if you are struggling to just keep the ball because you can't run, and Michigan's going to come out and force Blake Corum down your throat for 4 quarters, then it's going to be a long day. And we got to see this offensive line be able to step up and create balance. And I would like to see a little bit better play calling, in my opinion. I know it's not a super big issue. I don't think it's a deal breaker, but I would like to see Ryan Day take advantage of what's there more frequently, and trying just not to get in his own head, I feel like, or try to do too much in a game where you don't need to.
I hate to end this thing on a bad note, but
it wouldn't be an Ohio State podcast if it didn't, I don't think so.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know if you can improve your toughness over 2 weeks. I don't know if that's possible. Toughness is a thing that stretches over a period of time. It's developed in the off season, at 5, 6 in the morning when you're out there working out, conditioning, lifting weights, spring ball, summer training. That's where you develop toughness. I don't know if you can develop that in 2 weeks, and that's maybe not a good thing.
So
but
let me ask you, do you think that's the main issue then?
It's presented itself. I mean, for sure, it's presented itself. I don't know if it's the main issue. Maybe really it's just there is toughness there, but not everybody is clicking on the same page, and they're just waiting for it all to kind of come together. Hey, you're still undefeated, one of the best teams in the country, and you haven't played your best game yet. So that's not a bad thing. Even though I kind of said the plateau thing earlier, there's an opportunity this week to start peaking.
There's another level. Yeah, there's another level. You just have to take whatever steps you need to take. and get to that point. And this is a good time to do that, considering there's only 3 more games until hopefully what you have in a Big Ten championship game and college football playoffs. So, and you got one big one standing directly in the way. So I do think that the team will be ready for Michigan. I think they've heard, not being physical enough. I don't know if it's that they aren't physical. I think they are. And they've proven that they can move people, and they've proven that they can take punches in the mouth and at least bounce back in those. But it's going to be tougher to bounce back against a team like Michigan than it is a team like Northwestern. And that's what
100%.
that's what worries me.
Yep. And Ryan Day, there's a reason that he's one of the best coaches in the country. There's a reason that he gets paid the salary that he does. And that's to make sure that he brings out the best in his guys, and he gets everybody to kind of start to play their perfect game towards the end of the season. This is the moment. This is the opportunity. Get it done.
Absolutely. Well, that's all we had today. TJ, as always, pleasure having you on. Pleasure talking to you. And hopefully next week when we do this again, we have a little bit different song to sing about this team. But always a pleasure, brother.
Scoop Nation, Scoop World, Ryan. Appreciate it, man.
Have a good one.